Debbie Gravano wasn't what I'd expected. There was no makeup, fancy hair, jewelry, or gum chewing. She was exactly my age, which made her 7 years younger than her husband. With short hair and dressed in jeans and a cotton sweater, she was the archetypal girl next door. She could have passed for any one of about 50 girls from my suburban high school class. Nervous as Debbie was, she would smoke during the entire meeting. Her relief at seeing Maddie and Frank was palpable. She'd been alone in the suite waiting for us, and had evidently worked herself into a state. After she let us in, she led us to a living room where she spoke softly with Maddie and Frank, while Bruce and I stood off to the side. The conversation was about logistics, what Debbie had told her children about where she was going, when she was expected back, when she was planning to see Gravano again at the MCC. I was struck by all the first names they used. Maddie and Frank had plainly spent a lot of time with her, and she seemed to trust them completely. After a few minutes, Debbie turned to me, and I put out my hand. "Hi, I'm John Gleeson." Debbie said hi, but wasted no time with pleasantries. "Sammy is willing to cooperate with you. He's willing to testify at the trial, but he wants to meet you first, and he wants immunity. He also wants a 1-year limit on cooperating, like Michael Franzese got, and he won't testify against his friends." She said it mechanically, with no inflections. Just as Maddie had said in the car, it was as if she'd memorized her lines. I had the sinking feeling that this entire exercise might be nothing more than a diversion, intended to distract us from getting ready for trial. I looked at Bruce, who was supposed to have passed along the message that immunity was out of the question. I could tell he was annoyed, and that he had, in fact, passed the news along to no avail. The so-called Michael Franzese Memorial Cinderella Clause was even less likely to come Gravano's way. Franzese was a young, handsome, college-educated captain in the Colombo family. He'd gotten jammed up in the late 1980s on a gasoline excise tax scam. Franzese was prosecuted by the Brooklyn Strike Force in 1989 in its waning days before it was merged into the United States Attorney's Office. Except for Laura Ward and Pat Cotter, the members of that office had one foot out the door when Franzese offered to cooperate. They made a deal that only a prosecutor about to leave government service would make. Franzese agreed to testify, but only in cases that were indicted within 1 year of his agreement. From the point of view of a cooperating witness, especially a gangster, the 1-year limit made all the sense in the world. It meant that Franzese's obligation was finite and short-lived. Since the law required the court to bring indicted cases to trial within a matter of months, he could expect to be finished testifying and to begin his new life in about 18 months. From the government's perspective, the 1-year time limit was ridiculous. If Gravano told me a Lucchese family soldier had come to him in need of urgent assistance in getting rid of a body, and that Gravano had assigned a member of his crew to the task, that wouldn't be enough to make a case. However, if 2 years later, a Colombo associate flipped and told us about a murder by the same Lucchese soldier, and that he and one of Gravano's guys buried the body, that was another matter. I might learn the name of the murder victim, or, with luck, even be able to dig up the body. With the combined testimony of Gravano and the Colombo associate, I might have a good case against the Lucchese soldier, the member of Gravano's crew who helped bury the body, and maybe others as well. A deal with Gravano that allowed him to refuse to testify in those circumstances was out of the question. If there was a silver lining to the ill-advised bargain struck with Franzese, it was that he didn't give up much information anyway. Although he'd risen to the rank of captain, he claimed not to have been involved in any murders. In fact, he could offer no help on any type of violent crime. When I took over the organized crime section in January 1990, Franzese's window of obligation was closing fast. I read all the debriefing reports and found only one plausible case, an obstruction of justice charge against one of the grand jurors who'd indicted Franzese. One Ong Tut had violated the juror's oath of secrecy by telling his girlfriend when they'd indict, and the girlfriend then got a few dollars for the information. There didn't appear to be any harm done. Franzese, tipped off about the date, didn't become a fugitive or try to tamper with witnesses or, as far as we knew, hide assets that he thought might be forfeited. But still, it was a violation of the law to leak grand jury secrets for money. As the new chief of organized crime, and as heir to the Franzese agreement, I was determined to get something from the deal. So I assigned the Tut prosecution to Joanne Navikas and helped her try the case. Thankfully, it was assigned to a judge who sat in the Long Island courthouse. In the relative obscurity of Uniondale out in Nassau County, we called a Colombo captain to testify against Tut, an unemployed janitor who couldn't even afford to retain counsel. Poor Tut got convicted, but the entire affair was embarrassing. Franzese had taken my predecessor to the cleaners. There was no way Gravano was going to do the same to me. I wasn't about to explain all this to Debbie Gravano, so I just gave her the bottom line. Debbie, Sammy is a murderer. He can't get immunity. It's impossible. A 20-year cap is the absolute best he can hope for, and even that is not guaranteed. I have to meet with him first. He'll have to proffer. Also, forget about any 1-year limit on his cooperation. It's not going to happen.